My name is Sarah, and I never thought a simple Tuesday morning in October would turn my entire world upside down. I was 24, working as a barista at Coffee and Dreams in downtown Portland, Oregon, trying to save enough money for nursing school while living in a tiny studio apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery. The autumn air was crisp that morning, with golden leaves dancing outside the coffee shop windows. The familiar sounds of the espresso machine and morning chatter filled the space as I prepared for what I thought would be just another ordinary day. But sometimes, life has other plans. Around 10 a.m., when the morning rush had finally died down, I noticed something unusual happening across the street. People were gathering outside St. Michael's Catholic Church, not for a service, but for something else entirely. Father Mackenzie, the elderly priest I'd seen around the neighborhood for years, was standing on the church steps with a large wooden box beside him. "Sarah, look at that," said my co-worker Jake, pointing toward the church. "Looks like Father Mackenzie is handing out something to everyone." I wiped down the counter and watched through the window as person after person approached the priest. Each one received what appeared to be a white envelope. The expressions on their faces were fascinating. Some looked surprised, others emotional, and a few even started crying right there on the church steps. "Maybe it's some kind of community announcement," I suggested, but something about the scene felt more personal, more intimate than a general notice. Throughout the morning, I watched as dozens of people from our neighborhood made their way to the church. Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop, Mr. Mai Rodriguez, who ran the corner deli, even the teenagers who usually hung out at the skate park. Everyone seemed to know about whatever was happening. During my lunch break, curiosity got the better of me. I walked across the street, my heart beating faster with each step. As I approached the church steps, I could see Father Mackenzie more clearly. He was in his 70s, with kind blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and silver hair that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Excuse me, Father Mackenzie," I said, my voice slightly nervous. "I've been watching from the coffee shop, and I was wondering, what's going on here today?" He looked at me with those gentle eyes and smiled. "Sarah from the coffee shop, isn't it? I've seen you working there for quite some time now." I nodded, surprised he knew my name. "Well, my dear," he continued, "I've been entrusted with a very special task today. Someone in our community wanted to reach out to the people who have touched their life in some way. They've written personal letters to many folks in the neighborhood." My heart sank a little. "Oh, that's beautiful. What a wonderful gesture." Father Mackenzie studied my face for a moment. "Were you hoping to receive one?" I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Oh no, I wasn't expecting anything. I was just curious. I'm sure whoever wrote them doesn't even know me. I keep to myself mostly, just work and save money for school." The priest nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the people who think they're invisible are the ones who shine the brightest," he said cryptically. I spent the rest of my shift watching the last few people receive their letters. By closing time, the box beside Father Mackenzie was empty, and he had disappeared back into the church. I tried to push away the small voice in my head that wondered why I hadn't been included, telling myself it was silly to feel left out of something I had no right to expect. That evening, as I climbed the narrow stairs to my apartment, the smell of Mrs. Chen's fresh bread usually brought me comfort. But tonight, I felt an unexpected loneliness. I heated up leftover soup and sat by my small window, looking down at the now quiet church across the street. Who could have written all those letters? And what did they say that made so many people cry? I found myself creating stories in my mind about each person I'd seen receive an envelope. Maybe Mrs. Patterson's letter thanked her for always having the perfect flowers for every occasion. Maybe Mr. Rodriguez's acknowledged how his warm smile made everyone feel welcome in his deli. I was lost in these thoughts when I heard a gentle knock at my door. It was unusual. Mrs. Chen usually called up from downstairs if she needed something, and I rarely had visitors. Opening the door, I was shocked to find Father Mackenzie standing in the hallway, slightly out of breath from climbing the stairs. "Father Mackenzie, is everything all right?" I asked, immediately worried something had happened. "Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just not as young as I used to be," he said with a chuckle. "May I come in for a moment? I have something for you." My heart started racing as I stepped aside to let him in. My tiny apartment suddenly felt even smaller with his presence, but he looked around with genuine warmth. "You've made this place quite cozy," he observed, noting the small plants on my windowsill and the stack of nursing textbooks on my desk. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Can I offer you some tea or water?" "That's very kind, but I can't stay long." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope, identical to the ones I'd seen him distributing all day. "This is for you, Sarah." I stared at the envelope in his hand, unable to move. "For me? But I thought you gave them all out today." "This one was special," he said gently. "The person who wrote it specifically asked me to deliver it to you personally, in private. They said you might not come forward on your own." With trembling hands, I took the envelope. My name was written on the front in elegant handwriting I didn't recognize. The paper felt expensive, substantial. "Who?" I started to ask, but Father Mackenzie held up his hand. "All the answers you need are in that letter, my dear. The person who wrote it wanted you to read it first, and then, if you choose to, they'd like to meet with you tomorrow evening at the church, 7 o'clock. He moved toward the door, then turned back. "Sarah, sometimes we touch people's lives in ways we never realize. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples." After he left, I sat on my small couch, staring at the envelope for what felt like hours. The autumn evening grew darker outside my window, and the streetlights began to flicker on. Finally, with hands that still trembled slightly, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in the same elegant handwriting. As I began to read, my entire understanding of my place in this community, and in someone's life, was about to change forever. I unfolded the letter with careful hands, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure Mrs. Chen could hear it through the floor. The paper was cream-colored and expensive, and as I smoothed it out, I could smell a faint hint of lavender. The handwriting was unmistakably feminine, elegant, flowing script that spoke of education and refinement. "Dear Sarah, you don't know me, but I know you. For the past 8 months, I have watched you from across the street, and your kindness has been a light in my darkest days." I paused, my breath catching. Someone had been watching me? The thought should have been unsettling, but something about the tone of the letter felt gentle, not threatening. "My name is Eleanor Hartwell, and I live in the apartment above Hartwell's Antiques, the shop directly across from where you work. I am 82 years old, and until recently, I thought my days of being surprised by human goodness were long behind me. Eleanor Hartwell." I knew the antique shop. It was always dimly lit, with beautiful old furniture and curiosities in the windows. But I'd never seen anyone coming or going from there, never noticed an apartment above it. 8 months ago, I lost my husband of 57 years. Charles passed away suddenly of a heart attack, and I found myself more alone than I ever imagined possible. Our children live across the country, busy with their own lives, and most of our friends have passed on. I began to feel invisible, as if I was slowly disappearing from the world. My eyes began to fill with tears. I thought about my own feelings of invisibility, how I'd felt earlier that day watching everyone else receive their letters. That's when I began to notice you, Sarah. Every morning, like clockwork, you would arrive at the coffee shop with such purpose, such energy. But it wasn't just your work ethic that caught my attention. It was your heart. Do you remember the morning in March when that homeless man came into your shop? He was dirty and clearly hadn't eaten in days. I watched from my window as you not only gave him coffee and food, but sat with him, talked with him like he was an old friend. You treated him with such dignity when others might have called the police. I did remember. His name was Tommy, and he'd been so grateful, so human in that moment. I'd never thought anyone had noticed. Or the afternoon in May when that young mother came in with her crying baby and 3 other small children. She was clearly overwhelmed, counting coins to see if she had enough for even a small coffee. You bought coffee for her and treats for all her children, and when she tried to refuse, you told her it was a new promotion for mothers with young children. The relief and gratitude on her face, I saw it all from my window, and I cried. I remembered her too. Maria, her name was. She'd become a regular customer after that day, and we developed a friendship. She often brought her children by just to say hello. Sarah, you probably don't realize how many lives you've touched with your small acts of kindness. The elderly customers you remember by name, how you always ask about their grandchildren, the way you keep that jar of dog treats behind the counter for people walking their pets, how you always seem to know exactly what someone needs, whether it's an extra shot of espresso on a difficult morning or just a warm smile and genuine conversation. The tears were flowing freely now. I had no idea anyone had been watching, had been paying attention to these small moments that I'd never considered significant. But there's one particular day I need to tell you about. It was June 15th, the anniversary of Charles's death. I had been having an especially difficult day, feeling sorry for myself and wondering if anyone would even notice if I simply disappeared. I had made a decision that day, Sarah. A final decision. My heart stopped. The implication was clear, and it terrified me. I had prepared everything, written my letters, made my peace. But as evening approached, I found myself drawn to my window one last time. That's when I saw you leaving work. And instead of heading straight home as usual, you stopped at Peterson's flower shop. You bought a small bouquet of yellow roses. I later learned they were for Mrs. Peterson's birthday because you'd remembered her mentioning it the day before. But as you walked past my building with those bright yellow flowers, you stopped. You looked up at my dark window, and for just a moment, our eyes met. You smiled and waved, as if you'd seen me there before, as if you knew I needed that acknowledgement. Then you did something that saved my life, Sarah. You blew me a kiss. I gasped, remembering that evening. I had noticed someone in the window and had felt compelled to acknowledge them, to share a moment of human connection. I had no idea. That simple gesture, that moment of recognition, reminded me that I wasn't invisible after all, that someone in this world saw me, acknowledged my existence. It was enough to change my mind, to choose another day, and then another, and another. Since that evening, I have watched you with even greater attention, and I have seen a pattern of kindness that I believe needs to be recognized. You give so much of yourself to others, often at your own expense. I've seen you skip lunch to give food to hungry customers. I've watched you work extra shifts to help your coworkers with their problems. You live simply, save every penny for your education, yet you're always finding ways to help others. That's why I wrote letters to everyone in our neighborhood today. I wanted them to know about the extraordinary person who works across the street from me. I wanted them to understand that kindness is contagious, and it starts with people like you. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be about me. I know you probably think you don't deserve recognition, that what you do is just normal human decency. But Sarah, in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, what you do is extraordinary. You remind people that they matter, that they're seen, that they're worthy of kindness. I have a proposal for you, dear girl. Tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, if you're willing, I would like to meet you at the church. Father Mackenzie has been helping me with this project, and he's agreed to facilitate our meeting. I have something to discuss with you that could change your life, just as you changed mine. Until tomorrow, if you choose to come, know that you are appreciated, you are seen, and you are making a difference in ways you never imagined. With all my gratitude and affection, Eleanor Hartwell P.S. The yellow roses you bought that evening? They're still in a vase on my kitchen table. I change the water every day and think of them as a symbol of hope. I set the letter down and sobbed, deep, overwhelming sobs that came from a place I didn't even know existed. All this time, I'd felt invisible, insignificant, just trying to get through each day and save money for a better future. I had no idea that someone was watching, that my small actions mattered to anyone. But more than that, I was shaken by how close I'd come to losing someone without ever knowing it. Eleanor had been planning to end her life, and somehow, inexplicably, I had played a role in stopping that tragedy. A simple smile, a wave, a blown kiss, gestures that had cost me nothing but had meant everything to someone else. I looked across the street at the antique shop, now seeing it differently. Behind one of those dark windows was a woman who had been alone with her grief, watching the world go by, until somehow our lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. The clock on my wall showed 11:30 p.m. In less than 20 hours, I would meet Eleanor Hartwell face to face. But first, I had to process what I'd learned, and more importantly, I had to decide if I was brave enough to discover what she wanted to discuss that could change my life. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by my window, looking across at the antique shop with new eyes. Tomorrow evening couldn't come soon enough. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eleanor's words dancing in my mind, and I wondered what she could possibly want to discuss with me. I'd arrived at work early the next morning, hoping that staying busy would help the day pass quickly, but I found myself constantly glancing across the street at the antique shop. For the first time, I really studied the building. It was Victorian era, with intricate woodwork painted in deep green and gold. The shop windows displayed beautiful antique furniture, vintage jewelry, and old books. Above the storefront, I could see lace curtains in the windows of what must be Eleanor's apartment. How had I worked across the street for over a year and never really noticed this place? "You're distracted today," Jake observed around noon. "Everything okay?" I wanted to tell him about the letter, about Eleanor, about everything that had happened. But somehow it felt too precious, too fragile to share yet. "Just thinking about some big decisions," I said instead. The afternoon crawled by. I kept checking my phone, watching the clock, mentally rehearsing what I might say to Eleanor when we met. What do you say to someone who credits you with saving their life? How do you respond to that kind of responsibility, that kind of gift? At 6:30 p.m., I closed the coffee shop and went home to change. I chose a simple blue dress, one of only 2 nice dresses I owned, and brushed my long brown hair until it shined. I wanted to look respectful, worthy of Eleanor's attention and gratitude. The October evening was cool and crisp as I walked across the street to St. Michael's Church. The building looked different in the evening light, more mysterious, more sacred somehow. The heavy wooden doors were unlocked, and I stepped inside to find the sanctuary dimly lit by candles and late afternoon sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. Father Mackenzie was waiting for me near the altar, and beside him stood a woman who took my breath away. Eleanor Hartwell was not what I had expected. Despite being 82, she stood straight and tall, with silver hair arranged in an elegant chignon. She wore a beautiful navy blue suit that looked expensive and timeless, with a string of pearls at her throat. But it was her eyes that captivated me, bright blue, intelligent, and filled with warmth and something that looked like excitement. "Sarah," Father Mackenzie said, his voice echoing slightly in the sacred space, "I'd like you to meet Eleanor Hartwell." Eleanor stepped forward and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin soft but strong. "My dear girl," she said, and her voice was cultured, with the kind of accent that spoke of education and refinement. "I can't tell you how wonderful it is to finally meet you properly." I found myself speechless, overwhelmed by the reality of this woman who had been watching my life unfold from across the street. She was so much more vivid, so much more present than I had imagined. I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Your letter, it was the most beautiful thing anyone has ever written to me." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear, you deserve so much more recognition than one old woman's letter. Please, shall we sit? I have so much I want to discuss with you." Father Mackenzie gestured to the front pew, and we sat together, Eleanor and me side by side, with the priest nearby but giving us space for our conversation. "First," Eleanor began, turning to face me, "I want you to understand that everything I wrote in that letter was true. You saved my life, Sarah, but more than that, you reminded me that there is still goodness in this world worth living for." "I had no idea," I whispered. I saw someone in the window and I wanted to acknowledge you. It seemed like the right thing to do." "That's exactly my point," Eleanor said, reaching over to pat my hand. "You do the right thing instinctively, without thought of reward or recognition. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I shook my head, still processing the surreal nature of this conversation. Eleanor straightened in her seat, and I could see her gathering herself for something important. "Sarah, I asked you here tonight because I have a proposition for you. But first, I need to tell you a bit about myself, about my life with Charles." She paused, looking up at the stained glass window that cast colored light across the altar. "Charles and I never had children of our own. It wasn't by choice. We tried for many years, but it simply wasn't meant to be. Instead, we poured our energy into building a business together. Hartwell's Antiques became our child, our legacy." I listened intently, sensing that this background was leading somewhere significant. Over the years, we did quite well for ourselves. We traveled, collected beautiful things, made a comfortable life. But more importantly, we tried to help others whenever we could. We funded scholarships, supported local charities, helped young people get started in life. Her voice grew softer. "We always said that if we couldn't leave the world children of our own, we'd try to leave it better than we found it." Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "When Charles died, I inherited everything. The business, our investments, our savings. It's more money than one old woman could ever spend, and I have no direct heirs." My heart began to beat faster. I had a feeling I knew where this conversation was heading, but it seemed too incredible to believe. Sarah, I've been thinking for months about what to do with our legacy, with the resources Charles and I accumulated over 57 years together. I've been looking for the right person, someone who embodies the values we tried to live by. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. I want to fund your education. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. I'm sorry, what? Your nursing education, Eleanor continued, her eyes bright with excitement. I want to pay for your entire program, tuition, books, living expenses, everything. I want you to be able to focus on your studies without worrying about money, without having to work multiple jobs or sacrifice your health. I felt dizzy. This couldn't be happening. Eleanor, I can't accept that. It's too much. You don't even know me. But I do know you, she said firmly. I've watched you for 8 months. I've seen your character, your heart, your determination. You want to be a nurse because you want to help people, not because you want to make money. You live simply, work hard, and treat everyone with dignity and kindness. You're exactly the kind of person Charles and I would want to invest in. Father Mackenzie leaned forward. Sarah, Eleanor has asked me to help verify your enrollment in the nursing program and to serve as a liaison for this arrangement. She's quite serious about this offer. I looked back and forth between them, overwhelmed. But why me? There must be hundreds of nursing students who need help. Eleanor smiled. Because you saved my life without even knowing it. Because you treat homeless men like human beings. Because you remember people's birthdays and keep dog treats for pets and blow kisses to lonely old women in windows. Because in a world that often rewards selfishness, you choose kindness again and again. Tears were streaming down my face now. I don't know what to say. This is life-changing. That's exactly what I'm hoping for, Eleanor said gently. But there's more. More? My heart couldn't take much more. I'd also like to offer you a job. Part-time, flexible around your school schedule. I need help managing the antique shop, and I think you'd be wonderful at it. You have such a natural way with people, and I could teach you about antiques, about the business. She paused, looking suddenly vulnerable. To be honest, I could use the company as much as the help. I was overwhelmed, speechless, trying to process what felt like a complete transformation of my life in the span of a single conversation. You don't have to answer tonight, Eleanor continued. Take time to think about it, discuss it with people you trust. But Sarah, please understand, this isn't charity. This is an investment in someone I believe in, someone who will use this opportunity to make the world better. I looked around the church at the peaceful sanctuary where this extraordinary conversation was taking place. Just 24 hours ago, I had been a struggling barista, invisible and insignificant. Now, a woman I'd never met was offering to change the entire trajectory of my life. Can I ask you something? I said finally. Of course. That evening when you saw me with the flowers, when I waved at you, were you really going to? I couldn't finish the question. Eleanor's expression grew solemn. Yes, dear, I was. I had lost all sense of purpose, all connection to the world. But your simple gesture of acknowledgement, of seeing me as a person worth recognizing, it reminded me that connection is still possible, that kindness still exists. She squeezed my hand. You gave me hope when I had none left. The weight of that responsibility, of that gift, settled over me. I understood now that this wasn't just about money or education or opportunity. This was about the profound impact we can have on each other's lives, often without even knowing it. As we prepared to leave the church that evening, Eleanor handed me her business card and a key. What's this for? I asked, looking at the ornate brass key. It's for the shop, she smiled. Tomorrow is Saturday, and the coffee shop is closed, isn't it? Why don't you come over around 10 in the morning? I'll show you the business, we can have tea, and you can get a feel for what I'm proposing. No pressure, just exploration. I looked at the key in my palm, feeling its weight. Such a small thing, but it represented a door opening to a completely different future. Eleanor, I said as we stood outside the church, can I ask why you wrote letters to everyone else in the neighborhood? She smiled, and in the streetlight, she looked decades younger. Because I wanted them to know about you, dear. I wanted them to understand that they're part of a community where kindness matters, where someone like you exists. I hoped it might inspire them to pay more attention to the good around them, maybe even to create a little more of it themselves. As I walked home that night, the key warm in my palm, I realized that Eleanor had given me something far more valuable than money or opportunity. She had given me the gift of seeing myself through someone else's eyes, of understanding that my life had meaning and impact, even when I couldn't see it myself. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new possibilities, and the beginning of a friendship that would change both of our lives forever. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn sunshine that makes everything feel possible. I woke up early, still processing the previous evening's revelations. The key Eleanor had given me sat on my nightstand, catching the morning light like a promise. I dressed carefully in dark jeans and a soft sweater, wanting to look presentable but not overdressed for my first visit to the antique shop. As I prepared to leave, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and was surprised to see something different in my reflection, a spark of excitement, of hope that hadn't been there before. At exactly 10 a.m., I stood before the entrance to Hartwell's Antiques. The brass key fit perfectly in the old lock, and the door opened with a gentle chime. The interior was even more beautiful than I had imagined from glimpsing it through the windows. The shop was like stepping into another era. Rich Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, and shafts of sunlight illuminated dust motes dancing around carefully arranged furniture from different periods. There were Victorian settees with intricate woodwork, Art Deco lamps with colorful glass shades, and shelves lined with leather-bound books, vintage jewelry, and curious objects from around the world. "Sarah, you came!" Eleanor's voice called from somewhere in the back of the shop. I followed her voice through a maze of beautiful furniture until I found her in what appeared to be a small office area, surrounded by ledgers, catalogs, and photographs of various antiques. "Good morning," I said, still taking in the incredible atmosphere of the place. "Eleanor, this shop is absolutely magical." She beamed with pride. "Charles and I spent 40 years collecting these pieces. Every single item has a story, a history. That's what makes antiques so special. They're not just objects, they're connections to the past." Eleanor was dressed more casually today, in elegant slacks and a soft blue cardigan, but she still carried herself with that same dignified grace I'd noticed the evening before. "Come," she said, standing up from her desk. "Let me give you the proper tour." For the next hour, Eleanor walked me through the shop, telling me the stories behind various pieces. There was a writing desk that had belonged to a sea captain's wife in the 1800s, a set of china that had survived the San Francisco earthquake, and a rocking chair that had been handmade by a Civil War veteran for his newborn daughter. "The key to this business," Eleanor explained as we paused beside a beautiful mahogany dining table, "isn't just knowing the value of things. It's understanding their emotional significance, their stories. People don't just buy antiques, they buy connections to history, to beauty, to meaning." I found myself completely fascinated. I'd never thought about objects as carriers of stories before, but Eleanor's passion was infectious. "Now," she said, leading me toward a staircase I hadn't noticed before, "let me show you where I live." Eleanor's apartment above the shop was a perfect reflection of her refined taste. The rooms were filled with the most beautiful pieces from the shop, arranged to create a space that felt both elegant and comfortable. Large windows looked out over the street, and I could see the coffee shop where I'd worked for the past year. "This is where I've been watching you," Eleanor said with a gentle smile, gesturing toward a comfortable chair positioned near the window. "My morning entertainment was watching you arrive for work, seeing how you interacted with customers throughout the day." She led me to the kitchen, where fresh yellow roses, the same ones I'd bought for Mrs. Peterson's birthday, sat in a crystal vase on the table. "You really kept them," I whispered, touching one of the petals gently. "They're my reminder," Eleanor said, putting the kettle on for tea. "My reminder that kindness and hope can come from the most unexpected places." As we sat at her kitchen table with steaming cups of Earl Grey, Eleanor pulled out more documents from the folder she'd brought to the church. "I spoke with the nursing program director yesterday," she said. "Dr. Martinez was quite impressed when I explained what I wanted to do. She said you're already enrolled for the spring semester, but are planning to attend part-time because of financial constraints." I nodded, feeling embarrassed about my circumstances. I can only afford to take 2 classes at a time while working full-time. At that rate, it'll take me almost 6 years to finish the program. "Well, what if I told you that you could start full-time in January, with everything paid for, tuition, books, even a living stipend so you don't have to worry about rent or groceries?" My teacup rattled as I set it down with shaking hands. "Eleanor, I still can't quite believe this is real. Why would you do this for me? She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Sarah, let me tell you something about wealth. Charles and I were blessed with financial success, but we learned early on that money only has meaning when it's used to create positive change in the world. We helped dozens of young people over the years, funded educations, started businesses, supported dreams. And do you know what we discovered? I shook my head. The best investments we ever made weren't in stocks or real estate. They were in people. Good people who used their opportunities to help others, who carried our values forward into the world. Her eyes sparkled with memories. We have a young man in Seattle who's now a pediatric surgeon because we helped fund his medical school. A woman in Denver who runs a nonprofit for homeless veterans because we helped her get started. A teacher in Phoenix who's influenced thousands of children because we believed in her vision. She pulled out a photograph from her purse, a group photo of perhaps 20 people of various ages, all smiling at the camera. These are some of the people Charles and I helped over the years. They get together every Christmas and send us this photo. They call themselves Charles and Eleanor's kids. Her voice grew soft with emotion. We may never have had biological children, but we've had the privilege of watching these wonderful people grow and flourish and make their mark on the world. I stared at the photo, seeing the obvious love and gratitude in all those faces. I want you to be part of that legacy, Sarah. I want to watch you become the nurse you're meant to be, to help people heal, to carry that kindness you've shown me into a career where it can touch hundreds of lives. The magnitude of what she was offering, the trust she was placing in me, felt overwhelming. What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not worthy of this investment? Eleanor laughed, a sound like silver bells. My dear girl, you saved my life without even trying. You treat everyone with dignity and respect. You work hard, you're determined, and you have a natural instinct for caring about others. How could you possibly disappoint me? She pulled out one final document, a contract of sorts, but written in simple, clear language. This isn't a loan, Sarah. It's a gift, with only one condition, that you promise to help others when you're in a position to do so. Not necessarily with money. That may never be possible. But with kindness, with time, with the skills you'll develop as a nurse. I want you to promise to pay forward the gift you're receiving. I read through the contract, tears blurring my vision. It was exactly as she'd described. Full funding for nursing school, a part-time job at the antique shop with flexible hours, and a living stipend that would allow me to focus completely on my studies. There's one more thing, Eleanor said, her voice taking on a slightly mischievous tone. I've been getting lonely in this big apartment. There's a beautiful guest room upstairs that never gets used. If you'd like, you could move in here. Rent-free, of course. It would save you money and... She paused, looking suddenly vulnerable. It would give me someone to share meals with, someone to talk to in the evenings. I looked around the elegant kitchen, through the doorway to the beautiful living room, out the window at the view I'd been seeing from the other side for over a year. The idea of living in this gracious space, of having Eleanor as a friend and mentor, was almost too wonderful to contemplate. You really want me to live here? I asked. I think we could be wonderful companions, Eleanor said. You could help me with the shop, learn about antiques and business. I could teach you things, share stories, and we could both have the gift of not being alone. I thought about my tiny studio apartment, about the long evenings I spent by myself, studying and dreaming of a better future. Then I looked at this remarkable woman who had seen something in me that I'd never seen in myself, who was offering not just financial support, but friendship, mentorship, and a place to belong. Yes, I said, the word coming out stronger than I'd expected. Yes to all of it. The education funding, the job, moving in here, all of it. Eleanor's face lit up like sunrise, and she clapped her hands together with pure joy. Oh, my dear girl, you've just made me the happiest woman in Portland. She stood up and embraced me, and I could feel decades of loneliness and grief being replaced by hope and excitement. As we hugged, I realized that this moment was about so much more than money or opportunity. It was about two people finding each other across the void of loneliness, about the unexpected ways that kindness circles back to us, about the profound connections that can form between strangers who recognize something essential in each other. When can you start? Eleanor asked, stepping back but keeping her hands on my shoulders. Well, I need to give 2 weeks' notice at the coffee shop, and I should probably talk to my landlord about breaking my lease. Nonsense, Eleanor interrupted with a wave of her hand. We'll pay any penalties for breaking your lease early. And as for the coffee shop, why don't we go speak with your manager together? I'd like to meet the people you work with, and perhaps we can work out an arrangement where you can transition gradually. Over the next 2 weeks, my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined. True to her word, Eleanor came with me to speak with Jake and my manager at Coffee and Dreams. She was so charming and gracious that they not only agreed to let me leave early, but insisted I keep in touch and promised to send customers to the antique shop. Moving out of my tiny studio was bittersweet. Mrs. Chen cried when I told her I was leaving, but when she met Eleanor and heard the story, she was overjoyed for me. That woman has good heart, she said in her broken English. You very lucky girl. My first week living above the antique shop felt like stepping into a fairy tale. Eleanor had prepared the guest room beautifully. It was twice the size of my entire previous apartment, with a 4-poster bed, an antique writing desk by the window, and built-in bookshelves already filled with nursing textbooks she'd ordered for me. Every good nurse needs a proper library, she'd said when I discovered the books. Working in the shop was like getting a masterclass in history, art, and human nature. Eleanor taught me how to research pieces, how to authenticate antiques, how to tell the stories that made objects come alive for customers. But more than that, she taught me about running a business with integrity, about treating every customer with respect, regardless of what they could afford, about the importance of preserving beautiful things for future generations. People sometimes think antique dealers are just trying to make money off old junk, Eleanor explained one afternoon as we cleaned a Victorian-era music box. But we're really custodians of history. We're making sure these pieces find their way to people who will love and appreciate them. The customers who came into the shop quickly accepted me as Eleanor's protege. Word had spread through the neighborhood about Eleanor's letter-writing project, and many people made special trips to the shop just to meet me and express their gratitude for the positivity I'd apparently brought to their community. Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop brought me a bouquet on my first day. Eleanor's letter made me realize how much your smile brightens my morning when I see you through the coffee shop window, she said. I wanted to thank you properly. Mr. Rodriguez from the deli stopped by with homemade tamales. My wife, she read Eleanor's letter to me, he said, his English heavily accented, but his message clear. She say you make everyone feel welcome, feel important. We want you know you always have family at Rodriguez Deli. Even Tommy, the homeless man I'd helped at the coffee shop, heard about what was happening and came by to congratulate me. Eleanor immediately invited him in for coffee and treated him with the same dignity she showed all her customers. When he left, she pressed a $20 bill into his hand. Kindness should always be rewarded, she told me afterward. In January, I started nursing school full-time. The experience was everything I'd dreamed it would be and more. Without the stress of worrying about money or working multiple jobs, I could focus completely on my studies. I threw myself into anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and patient care with a passion that surprised even me. Eleanor was the perfect study companion. Her sharp mind and decades of life experience provided perspective on everything I was learning. When I studied geriatric care, she shared insights from her own experiences with aging. When I learned about grief counseling, she helped me understand the complex emotions surrounding loss and healing. You know, she said one evening, as I practiced taking blood pressure on her arm, Charles would have loved watching you become a nurse. He always said the most important thing anyone could do was help others feel better about themselves and their circumstances. 3 months into nursing school, something wonderful happened. Eleanor started dating. His name was Walter Morrison, a retired literature professor who came into the shop looking for first edition novels. He was tall and distinguished, with a white beard and twinkling eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The attraction between him and Eleanor was immediate and obvious. I haven't felt butterflies in my stomach since I was 17, Eleanor confided to me after Walter's 3rd visit to the shop in 1 week. Then maybe you should ask him to dinner, I suggested with a grin. She looked scandalized. Sarah, ladies don't ask gentlemen to dinner. This lady does, I replied, and we both laughed. Eventually, Walter worked up the courage to ask Eleanor out himself, and their courtship was the sweetest thing I'd ever witnessed. They went to concerts and art galleries, had long dinners discussing books and philosophy, and spent hours walking through the botanical gardens, talking about everything and nothing. Watching Eleanor fall in love again, seeing her blossom with happiness and renewed purpose, was one of the most beautiful gifts of this entire experience. She'd saved my life by giving me opportunity and direction, but I realized I'd saved hers too, by giving her hope and by creating the circumstances that led her to open her heart again. By the end of my first year in nursing school, I was at the top of my class. My clinical rotations were going exceptionally well, and several instructors had mentioned that I had a natural gift for patient care. The combination of technical skills and genuine compassion that Eleanor had recognized in me from across the street was serving me well in the hospital setting. But perhaps the most meaningful development was what happened in our neighborhood. Eleanor's letter writing project had started something special. People began paying more attention to acts of kindness, acknowledging them, celebrating them. The coffee shop started a random acts of kindness board where customers could post notes about nice things they'd witnessed or experienced. Local businesses began partnering on community service projects. Mrs. Chen started a community garden behind her bakery where neighbors could grow vegetables together. Mr. Rodriguez organized a monthly potluck dinner for anyone in the neighborhood who wanted to come. The teenagers from the skate park began volunteering at the local senior center, teaching elderly residents how to use smartphones and tablets. "You started all of this," I told Eleanor one evening as we watched a group of neighbors planting flowers in the small park across the street. "No, dear," she replied, squeezing my hand. "You started it. I just made sure people knew about it." As I write this, it's been exactly 1 year since Father Mackenzie knocked on my door with that life-changing letter. I'm 6 months away from graduating nursing school with honors. I've been accepted to work in the pediatric ward at Portland General Hospital, and I'm planning to specialize in child life services, helping sick children and their families cope with hospitalization. Eleanor and Walter got engaged last month. At 79 and 83 respectively, they decided they didn't want to waste any time being apart. Their wedding will be small and intimate, held right here in St. Michael's Church where this whole story began. But the most important thing that's happened isn't my education or Eleanor's romance, or even the positive changes in our neighborhood. The most important thing is what I've learned about the ripple effects of kindness, about how small acts of recognition and compassion can literally save lives and transform communities. Every morning, when I wake up in my beautiful room above the antique shop, I look across the street at the coffee shop where I used to work. I think about the morning I waved at a lonely woman in a window, never knowing that simple gesture would prevent a tragedy and change both our lives forever. I think about all the customers I smiled at, all the free meals I gave away, all the moments of human connection that I thought were insignificant but were actually creating invisible threads of hope and community around me. Now, as I prepare to become a nurse, I carry Eleanor's lesson with me, that we never know when our kindness might be exactly what someone needs to keep going, to feel seen, to remember that they matter. Every patient I'll care for, every family I'll comfort, every colleague I'll support. They're all opportunities to create those same ripples of compassion that saved Eleanor's life and transformed mine. The antique shop is thriving under our shared management. We've expanded to include estate planning services, helping other elderly customers arrange for their precious belongings to find good homes. Eleanor has started a scholarship fund, the Charles and Eleanor Hartwell Foundation for Acts of Kindness, that will provide educational support for young people who demonstrate exceptional compassion in their communities. 3 weeks ago, we received our first application from a young man named Marcus, who had been volunteering at a homeless shelter while working 2 jobs to support his disabled mother. His story reminded me so much of my own struggles, and Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as we read about his dreams of becoming a social worker. "This is how it continues," Eleanor said, as we prepared Marcus's acceptance letter and scholarship check. "This is how Charles's and my legacy lives on, through you, through Marcus, through every person whose life is touched by kindness and who chooses to pass it forward." As I sealed the envelope containing Marcus's scholarship award, I thought about the mysterious ways that love and generosity circulate through the world. A homeless man taught me compassion. A lonely widow taught me that I was worth investing in. A simple wave and blown kiss taught both of us that we were not invisible after all. Tomorrow, Marcus will receive his letter, just as I received mine a year ago. He'll probably stare at it in disbelief, just as I did. He'll probably cry, just as I did. And hopefully, someday, he'll find himself in a position to write a similar letter to someone else who needs to know that their kindness matters, that they are seen, that they are making a difference in ways they never imagined. The yellow roses on Eleanor's kitchen table have been replaced many times over the past year, but she always keeps fresh ones there. They're no longer a symbol of hope deferred, but of hope fulfilled, of love shared, of lives transformed by the simple decision to acknowledge each other's humanity. And every time I see them, I'm reminded that we never know who might be watching from their window, waiting for a sign that they matter, that they're not alone, that kindness still exists in the world. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest miracles. Sometimes a wave and a blown kiss can save a life. Sometimes the person you think you're helping is actually the one helping you. Sometimes all it takes is a letter to change everything. 5 years have passed since that October evening when Father Mackenzie knocked on my door with Eleanor's letter. And as I sit here writing in the same kitchen where Eleanor first offered to change my life, I'm overwhelmed by how much has happened since then. I'm now Sarah Hartwell Morrison. Yes, Eleanor insisted I take the family name when she and Walter adopted me as their daughter 2 years ago. At 29, I'm the head nurse in the pediatric oncology ward at Portland General Hospital, and I've just been accepted into a master's program for pediatric nurse practitioner studies. But more importantly, I've learned that the ripple effects of kindness never truly end. They just keep expanding in ways we never could have imagined. Eleanor, now 87, remains as sharp and elegant as ever. Her marriage to Walter has been a beautiful testament to the fact that love doesn't have age limits. They've traveled the world together, written a book about second chances in love, and have become the unofficial grandparents to half the neighborhood. The antique shop continues to thrive under their joint management, and they've opened a second location managed by Marcus, the young man who received the first scholarship from their foundation 5 years ago. Marcus is now 28 and a licensed clinical social worker. He runs a program that connects elderly community members with young people who need mentorship and support. The program, called Bridges Across Generations, has been so successful that it's been replicated in 12 other cities across the Pacific Northwest. When he got married last year, he asked both Eleanor and me to walk him down the aisle since we'd become his chosen family. But let me tell you about the most incredible development of all. 2 years ago, while working a particularly difficult shift in pediatric oncology, I met a 6-year-old girl named Emma who had been battling leukemia for most of her young life. She was scared, alone. Her single mother worked 3 jobs and could rarely visit during the day, and she'd stopped responding to most of the medical staff. Emma reminded me so much of myself at that age, quiet, observant, trying to be brave while feeling invisible. I started spending extra time with her, reading stories, playing simple games, just sitting quietly when she didn't want to talk. Slowly, she began to trust me, to smile, to engage with her treatment in a more positive way. One afternoon, as I was helping Emma with a craft project, she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "Nurse Sarah, when I grow up, I want to help sick kids like you do, but I want to help the ones whose families don't have enough money for medicine." That moment changed everything for me. Here was this little girl, fighting for her own life, already thinking about how she could help others facing similar struggles. It reminded me of the conversation I'd had with Eleanor years earlier about the importance of investing in people who would carry kindness forward into the world. Emma's treatment was successful, and she's now a healthy 8-year-old who visits the hospital regularly as a volunteer in our Child Life program. But her words about wanting to help families who couldn't afford medical care sparked an idea that has grown into something much larger than I ever imagined. Working with Eleanor, Walter, and the Hartwell Foundation, we established the Emma's Hope Medical Fund, a program that provides financial assistance for pediatric medical care to families who fall through the cracks of insurance coverage. We partner with hospitals, clinics, and social service agencies to identify children who need help, and we've assisted over 200 families in the past 2 years. But the fund has become about more than just money. We've created a network of medical professionals, social workers, volunteers, and community members who work together to provide comprehensive support to families facing pediatric medical crises. We offer everything from transportation assistance and meal delivery to emotional support and advocacy services. The most rewarding part has been watching how the families we help often become helpers themselves once they're back on their feet. Maria, The young mother I'd helped at the coffee shop all those years ago now coordinates our meal delivery program for families staying at the hospital. Tommy, the homeless man I'd given coffee to, got clean and sober with the help of social services Marcus connected him to, and he now volunteers at our fundraising events, sharing his story of how small acts of kindness can change lives. Last month, we held our annual Emma's Hope fundraising gala at the Portland Art Museum. Over 500 people attended, raising more than $150,000 for the medical fund. But what moved me most wasn't the money raised. It was seeing the interconnected web of relationships that had grown from Eleanor's original letter writing project. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 70s, had created elaborate floral arrangements for every table. Mr. Rodriguez catered the event with help from his 3 sons, who had all graduated from college with scholarships from various community programs. The teenagers who used to hang out at the skate park, now adults with careers and families, served as volunteer coordinators. Father Mackenzie, though retired, gave the blessing over the meal. And there, at the head table, sat Eleanor and Walter, Emma and her mother, Marcus and his wife, and dozens of other people whose lives had been touched by that original act of recognition, my simple wave to a lonely woman in a window. During my speech that evening, I talked about something Eleanor had taught me years earlier, that kindness isn't just about helping people in the moment, it's about creating the conditions for them to help others in the future. Every person we'd assisted through Emma's Hope hadn't just received help. They'd learned that they were worth investing in, that their struggles mattered to someone, that they weren't alone in the world. After the gala, as Eleanor and I were cleaning up, she pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, do you remember what I told you that first day about Charles and me wanting to leave the world better than we found it?" I nodded, remembering that conversation in her kitchen years earlier. Looking around tonight, seeing all these people whose lives have been touched by kindness, watching you grow into the incredible woman you've become. She paused, overcome with emotion. "I think we've succeeded beyond our wildest dreams." But Eleanor was wrong about one thing. She and Charles hadn't done this alone. They'd planted seeds of kindness, but those seeds had grown because they'd found fertile ground in a community that was ready to nurture them. Every person who'd received one of Eleanor's original letters had made a choice to let that recognition inspire them to greater compassion. Every family we'd helped through Emma's Hope had chosen to pay that help forward. Every volunteer who gave their time, every donor who contributed money, every medical professional who went above and beyond, they all chose to be part of something larger than themselves. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter that brought everything full circle. It was from a young nursing student named Jennifer at Oregon Health and Science University. She wrote, "Dear Ms. Hartwell Morrison, my name is Jennifer, and I'm in my final year of nursing school. I heard you speak at our career fair last month about the importance of seeing patients as whole people, not just medical cases. Your words resonated with me because they reminded me of something that happened to me 3 years ago. I was working as a receptionist at a pediatric clinic to pay for school when my younger brother was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. Our family couldn't afford the specialized treatment he needed, and I was terrified we were going to lose him. That's when someone told us about Emma's Hope Medical Fund. Not only did the fund pay for my brother's treatment, he's now completely healthy, but the experience taught me that healthcare is about so much more than medical procedures. It's about dignity, hope, and the knowledge that someone cares about your family's well-being. I wanted you to know that your brother's recovery inspired me to specialize in pediatric hematology. I'm planning to work with underserved populations, and someday I hope to start a clinic that provides free specialized care to children whose families can't afford it. Thank you for showing me that nursing isn't just a job. It's a calling to be part of the chain of kindness that connects all of us. With gratitude and admiration, Jennifer Martinez." As I read Jennifer's letter, I thought about the young barista I used to be, struggling to save money for nursing school, feeling invisible and insignificant. I thought about Eleanor, alone in her apartment, watching the world go by and wondering if anyone would notice if she disappeared. I thought about Emma, scared and sick in a hospital bed, already planning how she could help other children facing similar struggles. All of us had felt unseen at crucial moments in our lives. All of us had needed someone to recognize our worth, our potential, our fundamental humanity. And all of us had discovered that when we receive that recognition, when we're shown that we matter, we become capable of extraordinary things. The letter from Jennifer now sits framed on my desk at the hospital, right next to the original letter Eleanor wrote to me 5 years ago. Every day, as I care for sick children and support their families, I'm reminded of the profound responsibility we all carry, the responsibility to see each other, to acknowledge each other's struggles and dreams, to invest in each other's potential. Next month, Eleanor will turn 88, and we're planning a celebration that will bring together everyone whose life has been touched by her original act of recognition. The guest list includes over 300 people from across the country: nurses and social workers, teachers and small business owners, parents and children, all connected by the ripple effects of kindness that began with one lonely woman deciding to write letters to her neighbors. Emma, who inspired our medical fund, will be giving a speech about her plans to become a pediatric oncologist. Marcus will be announcing the expansion of his mentorship program to 3 more states. Jennifer will be there with her healthy younger brother, along with a dozen other nursing students she's recruited to work with underserved populations. But most importantly, we'll be celebrating something that can't be measured in dollars raised or lives saved or programs created. We'll be celebrating the truth that Eleanor taught me that October evening in the church, that none of us is invisible, that all of us have the power to change lives through simple acts of recognition and kindness, and that love, whether between strangers or friends, young or old, helper and helped, is the force that makes everything else possible. As I finish writing this story, I can see through my window to the coffee shop where I used to work. A new young woman is behind the counter now, and I've been watching her the same way Eleanor once watched me. Yesterday, I saw her give free coffee to a homeless man, and she smiled at him with such genuine warmth that it reminded me of myself years ago. Tomorrow, I think I'll cross the street and introduce myself. Maybe I'll tell her about Emma's hope, about the scholarship opportunities available through the Hartwell Foundation, about the community of people who believe in investing in those who invest in others. Or maybe I'll just order a coffee, smile, and let her know that someone sees her kindness, that someone notices the difference she's making in the world, that someone believes in her potential to do extraordinary things. Because sometimes that's all it takes to change a life. Sometimes all it takes is letting someone know they're not invisible after all. And sometimes, just sometimes, that recognition can set in motion a chain of kindness that spans generations, transforms communities, and reminds us all of the beautiful truth that we're more connected than we ever imagined. The yellow roses on Eleanor's kitchen table bloom fresh every week now, no longer symbols of hope deferred, but celebrations of hope fulfilled, love shared, and lives transformed by the simple, radical act of seeing each other clearly and choosing to care.